How do I grow my faith in an anxious age? The textbook, the place we all go to when we're talking about faith is the 11th chapter of the book of Hebrews. It defines what faith is and what it looks like, and it gives examples of people who have believed before us, regular, normal people who did incredible things just because they believed in something extraordinary. And Hebrews chapter 11, verse 1 starts like this. It says, now faith, that is this thing that we're trying to grow, now faith is confidence. Faith is confidence in what we hope for. So in other words, when I say I have faith in something, I am confident that what I hope for will one day become a reality. Faith is confidence in what we hope for. And it is assurance about what we do not see. It is certainty of the unknown. It is certainty of the unknown. It's interesting that the very first example that talks about this idea of faith in Hebrews says that it is by faith we believe that God created the world out of nothing, or out of that which was invisible. And if you really want to know how to build your faith, you got to understand how your faith was deconstructed in the first place. Notice that the very first thing that's been attacked to Christians is the idea that there is a creator who created the world. In other words, the author of Hebrews is saying is if you can't believe that God made you, if you're struggling with the idea that God's the one that created you, you will struggle with the idea that God can deliver you. And that's why that was the very first thing attacked, the very first thing that started deconstructing faith. In order for Christianity to get out of society I was just sitting today at 8 a.m., we were at the Growing Young Summit, and we were just hearing these statistics that just 9 years ago, 68% of Australians were considered Christians. Just 9 years ago. Today, last of 2016, 52%. And now 30% say, I don't believe in anything. And how did that begin? It began with the conversation of who made me. Was it intentional, or am I here by mere chance? And the very first thing that the Bible says to grow our faith is to understand that the person who made you intentionally created you, designed you, wanted you here. You're not just an accident. It's the assurance that although I didn't see it happen, I believe it did. And if I can believe what has happened in my past, it will be easier for me to believe what happens in the future. In other words, if I don't believe that the reason why all the things that have happened in my life so far is because there's been a God looking after me, not just by chance, not because I had good parents, it wasn't my resume that got me the job, it wasn't because I had connections, that there was a God in line, God working it out with me, for me, through me. That's the reason why I'm here right now. That means the reason why my past is the way it is because there's been a God who's been rescuing me all along. If I don't get that, it will be very hard for me to believe that this same God can do it again. That's where faith begins. Hebrews 11 continues in verse 6. It says, without faith, it is impossible to please God. It is impossible to please God because anyone who comes to him must believe that he exists and that he rewards those who earnestly seek him. Oh my God, this is crazy. I don't have enough time to share. Listen. Look how simple this spiritual journey is. God says, all I want from you is that you believe that I'm real. And yes, I know that I'm invisible. And yes, I know I've given you plenty of reasons to ignore me. But I am calling you to believe in my existence. Not only believe that I am real, but I want you to believe that I reward. Oh, man. He says, without that, it doesn't matter if you believe in the Sabbath or not. In fact, it's nearly impossible to believe in something so outrageous that you should stop working and just depend on someone else who doesn't exist, who can't see, stop working. Why not? Just because. Who said so? He did. But why? I don't know. He just said stop. That's really hard to believe in that. If you don't believe that he's the one that made you, and he knows better. He knows how you are made. He knows that you are a human being and not a human doing, who's constantly trying to do and do and do and do. It is impossible to please God without trusting that he actually exists and that he actually rewards. That's the beautiful thing. God says, I want you to believe that anyone who comes to me will get a reward. Oh my gosh, that's incredible. In other words, I should believe that when I worship that kind of God, my life should look differently than those who don't. I should expect more from God. When I come together in a place of worship, I should expect God there in the midst. Something supernatural should happen because he's a rewarder. I ought to believe that my life should not look the same as those who don't believe. I believe that even I go through the same trials and the same struggles, my life will come out differently because I believe in a rewarder. I believe he rewards. Well, how do I build that kind of a faith? I want to go to the story, Shadrach, Meschach, and Abednego, and look at their lives. And I'm going to read it, and I'm going to ask you to read it with me. I've been giving you some homework lately to go and read. I don't know how faithful you've been with your homework. I haven't been asking for the assignments back, so bad teaching. So we're going to read a little bit together today. Daniel chapter 3, verse 8. So if you have your phones, if you have your Bible, if you have an iPad with you, grab it along. We're going to read together. It'll be on the screen as well. Daniel 3, verse 8. We're going to look at the life of Shadrach, Meschach, and Abednego. And for those of you who are here, the first part of our series in Daniel, you recognize that he had three friends, Shadrach, Meschach, and Abednego. They were the best of the best, the wise of the wisest, taken out of Jerusalem to Babylon to be basically servants and slaves in the kingdom. Because of Daniel's greatness and his prowess, because of his wisdom, God has proven to Nebuchadnezzar that he is smart, he is wise, he's got God's favor on him. And so Daniel became the chief of magicians in the kingdom because he was able to share with the king a dream that he had and told him everything that was going to happen. In the dream, King Nebuchadnezzar saw a statue that was made. The head was pure gold. There was iron, there was silver, there was bronze, and there was clay and iron mixed together. That dream, Daniel told him, was the representation of what will happen in the future, the kingdoms that will come on the earth. And when Nebuchadnezzar heard this, at first he's just like, wow, oh my gosh, Daniel, your God is so wise, your God is so smart. And that was the immediate reaction to the greatness of who God was in Daniel's life. He poured gifts on Daniel, made him king, made him chief in Jerusalem. And Daniel, of course, because when you got friends in high places, it rewards. Daniel says, well, if you're going to do this for me, can you make sure Shadrach, Meschach, and Abednego are also leaders? And so now they're in the provinces. Nebuchadnezzar recognized that what Daniel told him was that although you are king now, you will not always be king. And although your nation is in charge now, your nation will not always be there. And so Nebuchadnezzar goes on a marketing spree. He wants to make sure that everyone is indoctrinated with the idea that he is in charge and he will never stop being in charge. And so, although in the dream he sees a statue made up of different metals, he goes, I'm going to make a statue all of gold. Forget this guy who just told me I'm not going to rule. I will rule. So sets up a statue, makes it full of gold, and then throws music. Whenever the music goes up, everybody bow down and say, long live the king. Down chapter 3, verse 8, we catch up because some of the other leaders have noticed that Shadrach, Meschach, and Abednego, when this propaganda is happening and they're trying to condition their minds to thinking that Nebuchadnezzar will live forever, that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego do not bow down. And they don't bow down not only because God is God and that's the only thing they adore and they worship and admire, but they also recognize that if they bow down to this statue, they're basically saying that Jerusalem will never be restored. That bowing down, they're accepting a different destiny than that which they knew. That although we're in exile, although life is hard now, although the situation is the way it is now, it will not stay that way. And by bowing down, they would go, well, this is our life now, forget it. Maybe God's not coming back. Maybe all this talk about, oh, there's going to be return in Jerusalem and the kingdom, maybe it's all gone. So, let's just live life the way it is. I mean, maybe we're never going to go back. So we just got to live life to the best right now. Sounds familiar? Maybe this Jesus is coming back thing isn't really real. Maybe this idea of another kingdom, and maybe that's not the way it's always going to be. Maybe we're just meant to live life and make the best of it right here, right now. But they refuse to bow down to that story. They refuse to accept that God is not coming back for them. And so they don't bow down. In verse 8 it says, at this time, some astrologers came forward and denounced the Jews. They said to King Nebuchadnezzar, may the king live forever. Your majesty has issued a decree that everyone who hears the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, pipe, and all kinds of music must fall down and worship the image of gold. And that whoever does not fall down and worship will be thrown into a blazing furnace. But there are some Jews, verse 12, whom you have set over the affairs of the province of Babylon. You know what's interesting about this story? I won't spend so much time here. It says in verse 12, there are some Jews. Why doesn't it say that the Jews? Notice that it wasn't all the Jews who didn't bow down. It was just some of the Jews who didn't bow down. And here's the thing that I need to tell you. You can't look at your religious entity and your denomination to follow what to do. You've got to stay convicted to what God has told you. Because it's not all the time your denomination, your religious group, your community will do what's right. Sometimes you got to stand up for what you believe in, regardless of what other people do. Not all the Jews, but just some of them. Some of the Jews you have set over the affairs of the province of Babylon, Shadrach, Meschach, and Abednego in particular, who pay no attention to you, your majesty. They neither serve your gods nor worship the image of gold you have set up. Verse 13, furious with rage, Nebuchadnezzar summoned Shadrach, Meschach, and Abednego. So these men were brought before the king. And Nebuchadnezzar said to them, is it true, Shadrach? Is it true? It's almost like his heart is in pain. Not you guys. Not you. Is it true, Shadrach, Meschach, and Abednego, that you do not serve my gods or worship the image of gold I have set up? Is it true? And we know that Nebuchadnezzar has some sympathy towards these men because of his relationship with Daniel. He has some sympathy towards them. And the reason why we know is because it already said that whoever did this, here's the consequence. But instead, he's trying to give them another chance. He says, look, here's what I'm going to do. Here's what I'm going to do. I know you mean well. I know you mean well. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to set this thing up over again. Now, when you hear the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, pipe, and all kinds of music, if you are ready to fall down and worship the image I made, very good. We'll forget about it. But if you do not worship it, you will be thrown immediately into a blazing furnace. Then what God will be able to rescue you from my hand? What God, this God thing that you believe in, this religious belief that you have, you're going to let this affect you? Come on. I know you shouldn't talk about this from the pulpit, but I'll confess that my wife has strung me along to watching The Bachelor. Pray for your pastor. The worst part about it is that I used to go, this nonsense. Why is anyone watching this nonsense? And now I'm going, is it on? So pray for your pastor. I confess, this is a confession. But this idea that your faith and your religious belief should affect you is something so weird for the rest of the world. On The Bachelor, there is a young girl who's on there who's Christian and whose beliefs and values and faith, and this is the American version, I don't know about the Australian version, but she says, my Christianity means a lot to me. Now, the last week of The Bachelor, I've recently learned, there's this thing called, what is it called? Fantasy Week. And it's an opportunity for you to figure out, can I live with this person? And to see your romantic capability, your ability to, your compatibility romantically. So you get 1 week, one night with this person that you're meant to marry and get engaged with. And this young girl got on there and she said to this man, she said to him, if you sleep with anyone else, I don't think I can move forward with you. Now, she said it knowing that everyone's watching her and everyone's rooting for her to be the one. And she took this stand. She says, look, I'm Christian. This is how I grew up. I am saving myself for marriage. I believe in this thing. I value this thing. So there's no way I can kind of move forward with you if this happens. Well, he said, okay, da-da-da-da-da. But I know he's like, this is just some religious belief. There's no way she actually means this stuff. So he goes ahead and does what he does. Comes back, and he's just expecting her to just go, okay, let's go. It's your turn. Let's go on this journey together. And she's like, I just need to know what happened. And he's like, well, I can't tell you that. And she's like, look, brother, I don't know what to do next. If I can't see myself, if you propose next week, I can't see myself saying yes to someone who was with someone else 6 days before. Now, I got to tell you, there's 2 other Christians on that show. In fact, one of the other girls who are there, they started the show praying together as a family. And the girl's looking at this person going, what's wrong with you? You knew what the show was about. Why are you making this such a big deal? 2 Christians. One takes their values seriously. The other is just somewhere up here. It's what God wants, but doesn't mean that's what I need to do. Well, she comes back. He says to her, yes, I've been intimate with others. And she basically, this is the part I really love. This is the part. This is what the king is basically saying to these 3 Hebrew boys. He's like, you know I'm going to have to throw you in the furnace, right? You know this is what's going to happen. Like, what God is going to save you then? Come on, be smart about this. Don't do this to me. Be smart about this. He says to her, are you really going to let this little thing affect our entire future? Come on. I'm really sorry. I didn't mean to. I didn't know how serious this was for you. She's like, I told you, brother. I told you before you even went into this thing. This is what I said. I warned you. You knew how much this meant to me. You chose to do otherwise. I cannot budge on this. Now, you have to understand that when you go into this girl's house and you read up about her, she is surrounded by Christian community. She is surrounded by people who have raised her up to believe that what God says is what I should live out. When you look at her father's very serious about his Christian values. They're praying over her. They're blessing over her. When you read up on her, this is not a joke for her. This is her life. And here's the first thing. Here's how you have to grow your faith. Here's why it's so important. Why your church community matters. Why your family matters. Why your friends matter. If I'm going to grow my faith, I have to surround myself with people who have faith. Your commitment will last as long as your community. Your community matters. Notice that whenever the story is told, it's not here's what happened to Shadrach, it's not here's what happened to Meschach, it's not here's what happened to Abednego, it's here's what happened to Shadrach, Meschach, and Abednego. It was community that kept them together. If they were alone, I don't think they'd be able to stand. You know how it feels like when you say, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, I'm going to do this, and then you're around people that do something completely different. How easy is it to withstand? It's not. There are people that are here right now that I know say, I used to believe this about God, but all of a sudden I don't believe this now. Why? Because you're in a community that struggles and questions God. Let's be real. Some of you weren't born in Australia. You actually come from a community that actually takes faith seriously, that takes spirituality seriously. You end up in a secular society, and all of a sudden you're going, is God real? Your community interprets how life looks like. So if you want to grow your faith, you have to sit amongst the right people. That's why Psalms 1 says, blessed is those who sit, stand, walk. It says in the negative, do not sit, do not stand, and do not walk. Meaning the way I grow my faith is where do I sit, where do I stand, how do I walk? That's how I grow my faith. Blessed is the one who does not walk in step with the wicked, or stand in the way that sinners take, or sit in the company of mockers. That is, look, sit in the company of mockers, meaning that where I sit, the people around me must believe what I believe, instead of mocking what I believe. Stand in the way that sinners take. That means I must take the stand against what everyone else is doing. Who walk in step with the wicked. That means who I'm walking with, my consistent journey, who I go along with matters. My community matters. So here's my question to you. If you really want to grow your faith and you really want to grow this thing called spirituality, who are you sitting with? Who do you spend your time with? Who do you spend your life with? Whoever you sit around, you will become like. So if you want to grow your faith, the first thing you got to shift is who you're sitting with. Now I need you to understand this thing. Commitment lasts better in community. When you look at them, they take a stand against the king, because here's what they answer the king when the king says this thing. He goes, guys, I do not want to throw you into this blazing furnace. Verse 16, Shadrach, Meschach, and Abednego replied to him, King Nebuchadnezzar. Such polite people. King Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to defend ourselves before you in this matter. Oh, I just love it. This is the thing. When you have faith, you become bold. When you believe in a different reality than what everyone else is saying, you become bold. You're so assertive. He goes, look, I don't even need to defend myself because I have someone who's defending me. I don't need to talk for myself. Listen, we don't need to defend ourselves in this matter. If we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God we serve is able to deliver us from it. Ooh. Oh, God, I'm running out of time. Okay, look. All right, I'll just have to finish it in a Bible study one day somewhere. Listen, he says, we do not need to defend ourselves if we are thrown in. Notice that their first step of faith is not God save us from the fire. Don't keep us going in. They're saying even if we go in, he can take us out. Most of us would be praying, Lord, please don't let the fire work. Break down the furnace. Don't let us even go in here. Change it up. Change the king. But they're going, we're going to go in, and he's going to take us out. That's crazy. That's some crazy faith. But it was their community that helped them remember that God is a God that can deliver them. Why? Because out of all the people in Jerusalem that died, they were rescued and brought to Babylon. This isn't the first time God has delivered them from chaos. They've taken a stand before. Where? Well, the first time they got there during their training, Daniel, Shadrach, Meschach, Abednego, they all took a stand and says, we're not going to eat the king's food. We're going to rely on God to take care of us. We're going to rely on God to make us healthier. We're going to rely on God's regime to make us smart and make us wise. We're not going to depend on your diet. They took a stand. At that point, it was a private stand because no one else knew but their leader. Even the king didn't know they took a stand, but they took a stand privately. So here's the thing. Here it is. Here's lesson number 2. If you want to grow your faith, and you want to take a stand for God, you can't take a stand publicly until you've learned to take a stand privately. You want to take a stand for God? Because look, what they say is actually really ridiculous. I mean, it's what I call ridiculous faith. If we are thrown in the blazing furnace, the God we serve is able to deliver us from it. And remember, not only does he exist, but he's a rewarder, and he will deliver us. Wow. He can deliver, and he will deliver. Now, that's amazing. That's incredible faith. They're not even like going, oh, maybe he could deliver us. No, like he will deliver. But then this is the part that I call ridiculous faith. Verse 18. But even if he does not, what? You mean to tell me you're still going to believe in the person that does not behave what you believe? You're going to keep trusting a God who doesn't come through? You're going to trust God even when what you thought about him does not become a reality? Even if he does not. We want you to know, Your Majesty. That about politeness. We want you to know that we will not serve your gods or worship the image of gold you have set up. Wow. Even if. Even if faith does not start in the public realm, even if faith starts at home. It starts in your everyday life. Choosing to be consistent in your prayer walk, to be consistent in your Bible study. We spent 21 days fasting, and at the last video I shared with you that godliness, spirituality doesn't come by trying, it comes by training. You can't try to be religious. You can't try to be spiritual. You have to train to be like that. Just like a baby just doesn't know how to eat. I know now. You got to train the baby. And the baby's just not going to know how to sleep. I mean, it confuses me that Noah is crying desperately. Diaper's okay. Everything's okay. Crying. What's wrong? He's tired. And I'm going, bro, just sleep. Just sleep. That's all you got to do is sleep. But you got to teach him how to sleep. You got to train him how to sleep. If we need training for the physical things, you don't think we need training for spiritual things? Nobody tries to eat. Nobody tries to sleep. They were trained. We need training, and training means practice. So that's the reason why it's the basic stuff. Some of us, we want these great miracles. We want to have this incredible faith, but we don't do the basics. How about just saying, I'm going to pray every day, 5 minutes. And look, even though I pray and nothing's happening in my life, I'm going to keep praying. Crazy. Even though when I read my Bible, I'm like, I don't get this. Keep doing it. It'll get there one day. Even when I fast the first time, it didn't work. Try it again. Because with everything in life, you know what we keep doing? When we want something bad enough, we keep trying. Hello? Come on. Let's be honest. You go for the job interview, you don't get it. Do you go, I hate jobs, I'm done. Jobs don't exist. Forget it. Not going to work anymore. That's it for me. I'm going to get my sign up, and from now on, I'm just asking people for money. None of us do that. You know what we do? We try again. And they reject us. And we try again. And they reject us. Why? Because you believe that money will change your life. Do you believe that God will change your life? And so you got to keep trying with him. Keep depending on him. Shadrach, Meschach, and Abednego, they took a stand privately. They decided that, look, we're not going to eat this thing. And because they're able to do it privately, they're able to do it publicly. Now, I don't need to tell you what happens next. Who you walk with matters. And when you walk with God, he will walk you out of anything. When you walk with God, he will walk you out of anything. Sit in the right community. Stand up privately, and then you'll be able to stand publicly. Because you can't change what you tolerate. It's hard for you to say, I don't believe in this when you do it at home. I love people who are vegetarian at church. In front of everyone else. I remember this one time, I grew up in a Seventh-day Adventist church. I grew up in that community, and there was one of the head deaconess at church would come, and just one of the most amazing persons in our church, just incredibly, just dressed very well all the time, and just incredible. And then one day, me and my mom were going somewhere to a concert, and I looked over and I said, "Is that the head deaconess?" And I was so amazed. She looked drastically different. At church, beautiful person, just very, pure and holy, no makeup, no anything, very simple. At this concert, she had earrings and jewelry and chains and makeup and high heels. And I said, this can't be Sister So-and-so. She's a totally different person. And look, I'm not saying anything about jewelry or anything. I'm just saying, why can't you be the same way everywhere? If you truly believe in it, live it. But most of us, we live out our beliefs for other people. We live like the way we think other people want us to live, instead of living for God. So if you can't take a stand privately, you'll never take a stand publicly. When you walk with God, he will walk you out. The story continues. Verse 19, Nebuchadnezzar was furious with Shadrach, Meschach, and Abednego, and his attitude toward them changed. He ordered the furnace heated 7 times hotter than usual. His attitude, you recognize his attitude toward them changed, right? He changed his attitude because before he was really hoping that they listened to him. And now they're like, oh, you're not listening to me? I'm going to show you. I'm the king. I'm going to show you. He ordered the furnace heated 7 times hotter than usual and commanded some of the strongest soldiers in his army to tie up Shadrach, Meschach, and Abednego. I don't get it. When the devil loses, he really acts weird. You're going to throw somebody into the furnace. What's the point of tying them up? Like it doesn't even make sense. But it's because somewhere in there, they know that God is bigger. Jesus dies. He's dead. They put him in a tomb. But then they put guards to come and protect the tomb, the dead body. It doesn't even make sense. It doesn't make sense. So they make the strongest soldiers tie him up. And then the thing that's so funny is that when people set up traps for you, often they're the ones that fall in the very trap that they set up. We didn't even get to finish Esther and Mordecai's story and how Haman's trap for Mordecai is what he died on. This is the kind of God you serve, people. This is the kind of God we live in, we believe in. He's the kind of God who the Bible says he will give up people for your stead. Oh my God, that's crazy. They get thrown into it. The people throwing them in get burnt and die. And yet Nebuchadnezzar goes, wait. Verse 24, the king Nebuchadnezzar leaped to his feet in amazement and asked his advisors, weren't there 3 men that we tied up and threw into the fire? They replied, certainly, your majesty. He said, look, I see 4 men walking around in the fire. Wait, I thought they were bound. They're unbound. They're unharmed. And the 4th looks like a son of the gods. Nebuchadnezzar then approached the opening of the blazing furnace and shouted, Shadrach, Meschach, and Abednego, servants of the Most High God, come out here. So Shadrach, Meschach, and Abednego, they came out of the fire, and the satraps, prefects, governors, royal advisors crowded around them. They saw that the fire had not harmed their bodies, nor was a hair of their heads singed. Their robes were not scorched, and there was no smell of the fire on them. Nebuchadnezzar said, praise be to the God of Shadrach, Meschach, and Abednego. Wasn't there 3 men? There was another in the fire. There was another person in the fire. And look. In the king's mind, he goes, who else is there in the fire? It looks like someone who doesn't look normal, but he doesn't understand that the person in the fire was fire. The Bible calls God a consuming fire. Do you know that you use fire to stop fire sometimes? That it takes fire to fight fire. I love that the person that came down was the Son of God that came in the midst of the fire. Now I need you to understand how incredible this is, because you have to know Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego's original names so you can know how deep and how awesome this is. You see, Daniel was left out of this one. Daniel's name means God is my judge. The judge was left out. The person in the fire, Hananiah, Shadrach, Hananiah's name means the Lord is gracious. Grace got caught in the fire. It didn't burn. I love it. Meshach's name is who is like God. In other words, there is no one like our God. No one like our God was walking in the fire. Listen. Azariah's name, Abednego, his original name means the Lord helps us. Oh my God. I'm looking at this story and I go, it had to be intentional that God left Daniel out of this one. The Lord is my judge is not who we need in the fire. It is the grace of God we need in the fire. It is the reminder that God helps us. That's who we need in the fire. It's the reminder that there is no one like our God. And instead of Daniel, the judge, the one that declares and proclaims that God is my justice, instead of Daniel, the person that replaces the fourth friend is the Son of God, the Savior of the world, the one who says, my name is Emmanuel, God with us. God could have stopped them from back then. God could have walked away. God could have just said from heaven, let the fire be gone. God could have simply changed Nebuchadnezzar's mind and said, don't even put them in the fire. But God wanted to come in the midst of the storm and let them remind each and every one of us that when you're in the fire, He is not far from us. He's not away from us. He is with us in the midst of the mess. God is the person in the fire with us. His grace is enough. He is not like any other God you know, and He will rescue us. He will be there. He is Emmanuel, God with